let's talk about looking ahead. So we're now talking about planning for 2025, and what are some of the big things we see certainly.
Welcome to the Live Greater View, a financial planning podcast produced by VLP Financial Advisors that discusses life, money, and perspective. We help clients live their best life at every stage through our VLP Live Greater partnership process. Thank you for tuning in.
All right, here we are, Dan, wrapping up 2024. Heading into 2025.
Yeah. Let's go.
Let's hope it's just as good a year. A lot of things on the plate. Certainly, as we start to look ahead to 2025, this is a lot of times we start doing our planning with clients and see what changed. Certainly, we're going to have some macro changes. We're going to have a new president. That's already been decided. So with that comes, from a client perspective, a lot of times we get feedback that this is going to impact the markets, this is going to change things. And what we typically see is it doesn't, right? There might be some short-term volatility, but in the long term, it's kind of just a blip.
Yeah, I mean, well, half of people think it's going to be a change for the better, and the other half probably think it's going to be a change for the worse.
Yep.
But that happens in every presidential election, whether you're Democrat or Republican. So, but I don't see this being an issue from a long-term perspective. They can only be president for 4 years, so I'm not overly concerned from that perspective. But there's still the fear of the unknown.
Yeah. So a lot of times our conversations is, clients want to know how it's going to affect things, but the reality is what we see time and time again in history shows it doesn't, right? Maybe short term, but so that brings us back to where we really get into the meat of planning with clients. And what is it that is important and how we're going to work to get there?
Yeah, the economy is going to keep moving along. We all went to work on Wednesday.
Yeah.
It's going to keep happening next year, and the economy is just going to keep moving regardless of what kind of policies they put into place. But there is concern around tax policy, obviously, with the sunsetting at the end of 25, the old tax rules.
Right. And well, to be fair, those tax rules came in from the president who's going to be coming into office. So
Correct.
That is favorable for taxes from that perspective.
Yep.
Now that could change, right? We always know that what candidates say they're going to do and what actually happens are not always the same, right?
Yeah.
And we don't know. It depends on how the House and and Senate and everything looks as we enter in.
Yeah, the campaign trail and reality are two different things. They just aren't the same.
Exactly. All right, so let's talk about, as we're looking ahead and where we see, certainly things that we talk with clients at the end of the year, tax planning, that's one thing. And then that also comes into conversations about Roth conversion. So let's start there a little bit about 2024, things that we look at and talk about, and then move into some of the planning we look at when we're looking at the next year, so 2025.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly want to look at withholdings, what you've had withheld for tax purposes from your paycheck or estimated payments. And what I find is people don't mind owing when you do that planning. If you tell them, hey, you're going to owe $10,000, $5,000, whatever it is, at least they know. They get more upset when April rolls around and
a surprise,
and they go, "Why do I owe all this money?" You're like,
right.
You didn't withhold enough tax.
Yep.
So, obviously getting later in the year to be able to make a lot of changes, but you certainly could do an estimated payment if you thought, hey, I was certainly under withheld for federal taxes, or maybe even state. You can also, say, well, I want to lower my income, so I'll add more to my 401k plan, like all my paycheck or something like that, if it's affordable.
If you haven't maxed out already.
Yeah, exactly. But you're certainly learning now. I think most of the planning probably starts in September, October timeframe, because you have a little bit more time. Mm-hmm. It's harder to do tax planning earlier in the year because you don't know what's going to happen during the year. So the window is relatively short, so that the numbers are as accurate as possible. And that's the biggest thing. You're trying to look forward, and that can be difficult for some. Yep. Depending on how your income works. Like, do you get bonus in December and you don't know what it's going to be? And you're like, how do I plan for that?
Exactly. Yeah. And that also gives you opportunity to, if you make sure you're maxing out your 401k. Again, those are things you should think about at the beginning of the year, because you kind of typically know what your base salary is. But if you do get a bonus, it gives you an opportunity to maybe elect to put more in.
Sure.
But also on, one of the other things, certainly if you have an individual investment or joint investment account, is capital gains.
Yep.
And we're seeing some this year again. I mean, not unexpected with as strong as the markets were in 23 and 24. Some investments are paying capital gains, or if you rebalanced because maybe you were, your investments did so well and your bond piece hasn't kept up, making that change. So that's a little something that we look at in that fourth quarter tax planning.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're looking to sell something because you were lucky enough to own NVIDIA or some of these other stocks that went crazy, or even a mutual fund or an ETF that did particularly well this year, and you're saying, well, I want to take some of that risk off the table, you may be waiting until January 2nd to make that trade because you're going, hey, I'll just defer that tax for another year.
Yep.
So you're always trying to find ways to, keep taxes at a minimum as best you can, but we all know we can't eliminate them. It's just a necessary evil.
Yep. Two constants, taxes and death.
Yeah,
Exactly. Hasn't changed. So one of the other things, let's talk a little about Roth conversions. That comes up a lot, at the end of the year, because again, for all the reasons you've mentioned, we really don't have the full tax picture as far as income, bonuses, capital gains until then. And then Roth conversions, which have become a lot more on the forefront because of some of the rule changes with IRAs, beneficiary IRAs. But Roth conversions, we spend a lot of time kind of looking at client situations and opportunities there.
Yeah, it's all about, the fancy word is tax arbitrage. Are you in a year where your tax rate is going to be lower than maybe particular years because you retired?
Yep.
You had a spouse who passed away this year and you're still able to file jointly.
Yep.
But yet the income has come down because depending on when your spouse passed away, you're not getting as much in Social Security or maybe pension and things like that. And you go, hey, you're still getting a really big standard deduction because you're filing jointly, but the income's come down. So should we be doing some Roth conversions because next year you're going to be filing single and it's going to be totally different.
Yep.
So there's certain circumstances. You take a sabbatical and you don't have
income.
You don't have any income. So whatever it is that you're in a lower tax rate, you go, okay, how can I take advantage of that? So that what I tell clients is that you're sort of levelizing taxes over your lifetime. Because what happens is that, those tax rates tend to go out when people retire. They defer their IRAs and things and Social Security. And then around 70, 73, they start having to take the required distribution. And then all of a sudden they're paying much higher taxes. And they go, what happened?
Right.
And you go, well, this is what happens. It's coming. So Why don't you plan for that so that, tax rate stays relatively even as best you can.
Another one to point out as far as deductions, if you had a year where you had a high medical expense, stuff that wasn't covered by your medical insurance, maybe a spouse or one of you had long-term care costs that weren't covered. That's another opportunity where you might have this large itemized deduction that now allows you to take advantage of this scenario also.
Yeah, and even if you didn't have medical, as it relates to medical, you go, well, I'm still looking for more deductions. You go, well, did you max out your HSA or FSA?
Yep.
Is there ways for you to get more deductions from that perspective and try to decrease that taxable income?
Yeah. All right, so we talked about tax planning from the perspective of the end of the year, fourth quarter, kind of that. Let's talk about looking ahead. So we're now talking about planning for 2025, and what are some of the big things we see certainly is, hey, are we on track? What are our goals? Are we saving accurately? Do we, what buckets are we utilizing? Qualified plans are easy, right? If you're eligible for a qualified plan, a 401k, 403b, whatever that is, are you maxing out? Another, conversation change I think has been, what money goes into your traditional 401k, so pre-tax deduction versus Roth.
Yep.
So that's been a bigger conversation. This will also be next year. There is a change where if you're between age 60 and 63, you get to put away more than just the catch-up contribution.
Yeah, it goes up. Yep.
Yeah. So, there's a couple changes coming down the pike from the Secure Act that are going to that are going to click on next year in 2025. So those are some of the aspects that we're talking with clients about. Hey, how are we utilizing your qualified plan? And what are some of the other options? Where should we be thinking about putting money as we look ahead?
Well, I mean, certainly if you've structured your goals and you have some, I think that's the first place to start. Usually if you're trying to accomplish something that's challenging, setting a goal allows you to figure out how to do that.
Yep.
Whether you're running a marathon or anything athletic, things like that. But the same is true with, saving money. If you think, oh, well, it's just going to magically happen without me spending much time thinking about it and doing things about it, then it's probably not going to happen.
Right.
So the goals are the priority. And then it's, okay, well, what's the best way to save based on my particular tax rate and how much income I'm earning, things like what's available to me through my work. Maybe I don't have a 401k plan at work.
Yep.
And so you go, okay, well, maybe it's just a traditional IRA or traditional Roth relative to the 401k. Are those amounts enough for you to attain that goal, or do you need to save money somewhere else? And sometimes it's we were talking about it earlier. It may not necessarily be, I need to look at everything that I'm spending. It may be just set aside, figure out what the number is that you need to save.
Yep.
$20,000 a year, $15,000, $30,000, whatever your income is, it's going to be different for everybody. And after that, you go, okay, as long as that got saved, what it got spent on, it's not necessarily the biggest deal.
Right.
Now, I mean, you got to pay your bills and all those things, but focus more on the thing you can control and not the thing, that is not as controllable, right? You're not going to walk around the house turning the lights off and going, hey, I got to save a couple bucks. Not that that's bad. I do that all the time.
When you have kids, that's common.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, figure out what that number is. And for a lot of people, that's the hardest thing. They go, well, I don't know what should I be saving?
Right.
And I tell people, I've never met anybody save too much money.
Yeah.
I met plenty of people who have not saved enough.
Exactly.
But it's rare that I meet somebody that goes, oh, I have too much. And if they do, which is rare, they're probably giving it away.
Right. Yeah. So I think, to your point, the big part is sitting down and figuring out where you are today and where you want to go.
Yeah.
How, if you're, when do you want to retire? How does that look like? What does your life look like? Do you want to even live here, or where you are now? Do you want a second home? All these things. Do you have kids to pay for college? What are the priorities that are coming down the pike? And then we got to figure out what that looks like, set that goal, and then we can back into those numbers. Easily, certainly if you have a 401k, you have a match. That's an easy way to start. I always tell, we talk to clients. I tell them all the time, 401k is easy because you can make an election and it comes out before you ever get it. You don't have to decide, oh, I got to put that money in my 401k. Payroll does that for you.
Sure.
Right? It's easy. If you have to be like, well, I physically got to move this money into my investment account or to my savings, sometimes things get in the way, So setting up automatic contributions, a lot of times getting that done before that money actually comes to you is, if it comes or it's very brief, right? It's going to your automatic. It works a lot easier.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind.
Yep.
Right? So the money was there, so you didn't think that you could spend it.
Yep.
You just saved it before you could even get your hands on it to go, ooh, I want to buy this shiny thing, whatever that shiny thing is.
Right. Yeah. So the goal setting's key, and talking about, where you are, where you want to go. And that's what we spend a lot of time with clients, just revisiting, hey, are the goals still the same? Have they changed? And then we talk about, okay, what do we have set aside? What are the opportunities we have to set that money, whether it's 20, 30, 40, whatever it is for them, a year aside? How do we do that tax efficiently, not only now, but as we look out, 10, 15 years down the road, whatever their glide path is? How does that affect the long trajectory? The concern, there's some challenges there because we only know the tax law we know now.
Yeah.
Right? We don't know what the tax law will be. Now, again, with our presidential change next year, most people look at favorably for taxes. So maybe it'll be same or similar, but maybe it won't. So there's, you can only do decisions based on things you know now.
Yeah, certainly the tax rules that we currently have in place are going to stay in place for 25, and they may make some changes early in 25 for taxes. I don't know if they'll retroactive them for 2025. That's difficult to do.
It is, yeah.
The government rarely does that. They have done it, but so anything they put into place, they go, hey, this is going to implement in 26, and then that allows you to do planning for that year because you go, okay, here's how they've changed and all those good things. So we'll know more here in the next 6 months probably of, okay, what changes are going to occur for the following year, in this case 26, from a planning perspective.
Yeah. So going back to that planning perspective, as you're saving the money you set aside, 401k, you have most plans have what's called the Roth option. And the difference between a Roth 401k and the Roth IRA is the contribution limits, right?
Yep.
You can put away a lot more money in the Roth 401k, and a Roth IRA, there are income limits that you're eligible to put in. So when you're thinking about, hey, which way do I want to go? It's kind of that tax arbitrage question. How much do I want to pay in tax today? How much do I want to potentially shelter from taxes in the future, right?
Yep.
Because 401k, you get the tax deduction now, grows tax-free. You pay the tax when it comes out. Roth, you pay the tax now, grows tax-free, and under current tax law, comes out tax-free. So,
yes, that's funny you mentioned. I've had multiple clients and even some CPAs say, "Hey, I think that the government's going to figure out a way to tax Roths."
Yep.
And I've said that is political suicide.
Yep.
Because I don't know how many trillions of dollars at this point are now in Roth, and what it's going to have. And if they come back to all the people who have Roth accounts, whether it's in a 401k or an IRA, and go, oh, we're going to tax it now, I'm pretty sure you're going to go, well, okay, well, I'm not going to vote for you when voting rolls around. So I seriously doubt that they're going to do that.
Yeah. Well, let's hope. I mean, but you don't know. So we got the traditional, we got the Roth, but the other, once you start saving and you've put in maxed out what you can put in there, because there's limits, right?
Yeah,
there's limits
sure.
on all of those options. Is then your individual or joint investment account, right? You decide you want to buy an investment, a stock, whatever that be, different taxation than the IRA or the Roth, right? If you hold it, if you hold it for 1 year, it's a long-term capital gain. Could be between 15, 20%, or if your income's really low 1 year, 0% tax.
Yep.
If so that's usually more tax favorable than the traditional IRA, which is going to be all income.
Yeah, in the long run. In the short run, you got 1099 income, so you're going, oh, I don't have to worry about this in my Roth, my IRA.
Right.
Just get deferral. So you have to be a bit more conscious about what types of investments am I putting into those accounts to try to minimize income if I don't need the income.
Yeah.
Right, I'm working, I don't need it.
Yeah, and the other part of that is, that money, both whether it's Roth or traditional 401k, IRA, is you got age limits when you can access it.
Sure.
And there's a couple circumstances where you can access earlier, but very rare. But the individual joint account, money you put into there, you can access at any time. You just have to take into account the tax picture.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So for looking ahead is what assets do you have? How are they structured? What is the tax consequences when and if you need to access money? That all goes into that kind of big picture. And we'll touch a little bit. We're not going to go in depth, but college education. 529s is a big opportunity where certain states, Virginia being one of them, where we are, allow you to take a state tax deduction. So,
Yep.
And it grows tax free. So it's again another opportunity to put some money aside for a specific goal that can have some favorable tax treatment.
Sure. Yeah. And then from a long-term perspective, having different tax buckets to pull money from allows you to do more tax planning. So as we were saying earlier, before this podcast was, if somebody deferred all of their money in their 401k and they said, this is great, I got $1 million plus dollars. You go, well, you don't really have $1 million or $1 million plus. Some of this is the government's money.
Yep.
But it's going to be very difficult for do any tax planning, because if that's the bulk of your assets, it's all coming out as income, and you go, you need money, you have to live.
Right.
And so, if you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s, you're probably looking at, okay, well, should I have some money in these non-retirement investment account, joint account or trust, depending on how it's structured, because that's going to be taxed as capital gains, and I'm only getting taxed on the growth, not the principal. Unlike a 401k, as you know, if it's pre-tax, every dollar that comes out is income.
Yeah.
So it's just a different tax, gives you the ability to have some flexibility in retirement. And people tend to like choice.
Yeah. And that's a good thing, a good point to segue into two implications, having everything in a 401k or IRA and it's taxable, certainly when you come to retirement, is that can have implications on your Medicare cost and your taxation of Social Security.
Yep.
So, I think the big one is a lot of people, they retire, and most clients are happy to move to Medicare because they find it covers a lot depending on where they worked, what kind of insurance they had, and the expenses are typically lower. But if your income is still higher than because of your large distributions from your IRA and 401k, which you need to live, you've now get hit with IRMA.
Yep. Yeah. So then you have to start calculating how much do I take out of this account before I create this income level that now my Medicare is going to be taxed 2 years later from now, because they look back 2 years. Just to make it more confusing for you. Am I going to be paying more in Medicare, and that's going to offset some of the other things that I'm doing. So,
and certainly if your income, as that income comes out from the 401k or IRA, it also has implications on Social Security being taxed.
Yeah. The more income you have, the more they tax Social Security.
So it's a snowball effect, right? You could get taxed 50% depending on where your income level falls. And if you're a married couple and you both have 401ks, it's probably a good chance you're getting 85% tax on your Social Security.
Yeah.
So it's just a snowball effect. So these are things you got to think through going back to, as you're planning, not even now, but towards retirement, what are those buckets available for you so you can pick and choose where you're taking? Because it's not uncommon now. 401ks started in the 80s, and that's been the only retirement bucket people have saved in. And some people are retiring with multi-million-dollar IRAs because they max out every year. They put in, and if you're married, you both could have a couple $1 million in there. And then when you have to start requiring them distributions, and if you didn't save anywhere else, now you're likely going to be hit with IRMA and tax Social Security your entire retirement.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, good problems to have, right? You have the assets to do these things, but it is a double-edged sword. So lots of things to think about, as you're looking into the next year. Certainly, kind of the highlights, just kind of recap is, revisiting your goals. If you don't have goals, let's start by making some.
Yeah, definitely.
But if you do, revisit, are these goals still accurate? What's changed? Is there something out there on the horizon that you want to add in or adjust? Maybe that second house, maybe, I was having a meeting yesterday with a client and what we budgeted for college and the reality of what their child's going to choose, very different. You don't know. When we get on,
we can do a whole podcast
on just college. Yeah. So, again, that's revisiting those goal pieces. Tax planning, it's important to look at it in the fourth quarter, but it's also important to think about as you look into the next year, what's going to change, right?
Yeah. Did you buy a house this year, right?
Did you sell a house?
Did you sell a house? If you bought the house, you go, hey, you may want to adjust your withholdings because now you're going to be deducting the
interest on the mortgage
interest.
Yeah.
So should you be adjusting your withholdings from your paycheck in the next year so that you're not getting a whole bunch of money back because you got a bigger deduction because you're a renter before and so on and so forth. So there's always something that's coming along, or there's always slight changes to people's finances to a certain degree that you go, oh, okay, I need to make some changes here, a little bit here, a little bit there. If there's dramatic changes to your job or where you live or having another kid or all sorts of things, then you go, okay, now we really need to spend a little bit more time, figuring all this out and how it fits into our overall planning.
Yeah. All right. So kind of to wrap up, we'll talk, again, as we're looking ahead, one, we're going to have a presidential change. That's done. That'll have some other effects. But the reality is from, what we've seen time and time again in history tells us maybe there's short-term volatility, but it tends to be a small blip. So don't do your planning and your investments based on a presidential change.
Yeah, if you're basing your investing philosophy on your politics, that's not necessarily bad, but I wouldn't make it, hey, I'm going to leave the market because I disagree or I don't like whoever's in, or on the other hand, I support him so much I'm going to change my whole philosophy as well. Like I said, the economy is just going to keep moving on. We're going to keep innovating, and new jobs are going to be created, and in the short run, there'll be issues.
Yep.
But we've always had issues.
Yeah.
You go back to the 60s to 70s, it just different names, different times.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. So, as you look ahead, lots of time. 2025 will be obviously a new and exciting year. They all seem to be exciting. But it's a good time to revisit your goals, think about all these different aspects, where you currently are, how you're saving, and what adjustments you can make to hopefully get there a little bit easier. Maybe the tax planning, take that into account. And if you're getting ready for Social Security and Medicare, if you're coming up on those dates and ages, it's a good time to start thinking ahead about how that's going to affect the overall picture too.
Yeah, definitely. I think the big term here is plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? We don't plan to fail; we fail to plan. And a lot of the articles we see, we get people asking us for quotes and things like that, and it's all about what do these people need to do? What do the public need to do? And you need a plan.
Right.
It's really expensive, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you're going to do with all your finances over the rest of your life, you're going to spend a lot of money.
Yep.
Planning for it helps you figure out, okay, how am I going to get there? Not planning for it can create some problems when things come up.
And stress, because you don't have a plan. Right. You can adjust a plan, but if you don't have one, it's hard to decide if this is good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah.
So. But all right, well, great. So if you are thinking ahead next year, saying, "Geez, I really don't have a lot of these things in place," or "I'm kind of curious," we'd love to talk to you. We have a great team here at VLP. It can help you do the planning, help you kind of put in perspective what that all looks like, and help you just make hopefully educated decisions. Or if you have a friend or family who this question comes up, feel free to share. We'd love to see how we can help.
Yeah, the holidays are a great time to talk about money.
Aren't they? Yeah, because especially we're usually spending it. So, all right. Well, thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to talking to you guys soon.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Live Greater View. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Spotify and recommend our podcast to family and friends. To learn more about VLP Financial Advisors, please check out our website at vlpfa.com. Thanks again.
And now for our necessary disclosures. Securities and advisor services offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA SIPC, a broker-dealer and registered investment advisor. All investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will be successful. The views stated in this podcast are not necessarily the opinion of Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned. Due to the volatility with the markets mentioned, opinions are subject to change without notice. Information is based on sources believed to be reliable. However, their accuracy or completeness cannot be guaranteed. Past performance does not guarantee future results.